Welcome to today's exploration of two of the most profound thinkers of all time, Carl Jung and Friedrich Nietzsche. In this video, titled The Psychology of the King, How to Think with Power and Purpose, Carl Jung and Nietzsche, we will embark on a journey through the ideas of these intellectual giants to uncover how their insights can help us cultivate inner strength, purpose, and the kind of authority that does not depend on domination, but on authenticity. Carl Jung, the depth psychologist who opened the door to the unconscious, and Friedrich Nietzsche, the philosopher who challenged humanity to rise beyond mediocrity, both stand as towering figures in the pursuit of human greatness. By weaving their philosophies together, we will discover a roadmap for thinking with clarity, acting with conviction, and living with power that is rooted in purpose rather than mere ambition. This is not just a lecture on philosophy or psychology. It is a guide for anyone who wishes to embody the archetype of the king, the one who rules first within himself before influencing the world around him. Part 1. The Archetype of the King in Carl Jung's Psychology. For Carl Jung, the psyche is not just a collection of personal memories or individual experiences. It is deeply rooted in universal patterns he called archetypes. Among these archetypes, one of the most essential is the king. The king is not merely a ruler of lands or nations, but a symbol of the ordering principle within the psyche. To Jung, the king represents structure, balance, and the authority of the self, the totality of one's being. When a person embodies the king archetype, they are no longer swayed by fleeting emotions, blind impulses, or the chaos of the external world. Instead, they radiate stability, just as a healthy king provides stability to his kingdom. But what does it mean to embody this archetype in our everyday lives? It means becoming the inner authority, rather than being ruled by external forces. Jung taught that those who fail to integrate the king archetype fall into one of two extremes: the tyrant or the weakling. The tyrant is domineering, insecure, and seeks power only to suppress others. The weakling, on the other hand, abdicates responsibility and lets life dictate his path, without exercising his own will. To live as a true king is to stand in the middle, balancing authority with responsibility and power with purpose. A king archetype is generative. It gives life, nurtures creativity, and establishes order. Think of how Jung described individuation, the process of becoming whole. Individuation requires us to confront the unconscious, integrate the shadow, and step into the fullness of who we are. The king archetype appears at the summit of this process. Only when the individual has faced their inner demons, claimed their hidden strengths, and reconciled with their shadow can they ascend the inner throne. From this seat of authority, they can lead their lives with wisdom. But the king is not only about inner balance, he's about blessing. A healthy king does not hoard power but distributes it. He affirms, inspires, and brings harmony. Without this archetype, people often wander in confusion, lacking a sense of purpose. This is why Jung saw the absence of the king as a psychological crisis. A man without an inner king is at the mercy of chaos, while one who embraces this archetype becomes a beacon of stability, not only for himself but for his community. Part 2. Nietzsche and the Will to Power. While Jung approached the psyche through archetypes and individuation, Friedrich Nietzsche took a bolder, more radical path. For Nietzsche, life itself is will, the will to power. This does not mean the will to dominate others, as many misinterpret, but the will to expand, to create, to overcome limits, and to shape the world according to one's highest vision. Nietzsche saw human beings as creators, constantly confronted with the challenge of transcending themselves. The king, in Nietzsche's philosophy, would be none other than the one who embodies the Übermensch, the overman. This is the figure who refuses to live by borrowed values, inherited dogmas, or societal mediocrity. Instead, he carves his own path, creates his own meaning, and lives with a courage that accepts even suffering as a necessary ingredient of greatness. Nietzsche's famous phrase, amor fati, the love of fate, captures this mindset. To think with power and purpose in Nietzsche's terms is to embrace one's destiny fully, without resentment or escape, and to use every challenge as fuel for transformation. Nietzsche criticized those who live as last men, comfortable, shallow, and risk-averse individuals who choose safety over greatness. In contrast, the king archetype in Nietzsche's thought is daring, creative, and unafraid to stand alone. He does not seek approval, for his authority comes from the fire within. He embodies the principle of self-overcoming, always striving to be more than he was yesterday. For Nietzsche, thinking with power means rejecting conformity. It is about daring to affirm life in its entirety, even its suffering, because it is through trials that greatness is forged. In this sense, Nietzsche's Overman and Jung's King archetype converge. They both demand that the individual stand as a sovereign being, responsible for his destiny, unshaken by chaos, and radiating authority born from inner mastery. When we unite Jung's King with Nietzsche's Overman, we arrive at a powerful vision of human potential. Jung gives us the psychological framework, the inner throne from which to rule, while Nietzsche gives us the philosophical fire, the relentless drive to create and overcome. Together they show us that true kingship is not about ruling others, but about ruling oneself so completely that one becomes a source of meaning, power, and purpose in a world that often lacks all three. Part 3. The Shadow and the King's Responsibility. Carl Jung insisted that no one can truly ascend to the throne of the inner king without first confronting the shadow. The shadow is that hidden dimension of the psyche where our fears, weaknesses, and unacceptable desires are stored. Most people avoid the shadow, preferring to see themselves as purely good or virtuous. But in truth, the shadow holds enormous energy. When ignored, it emerges destructively through projection, resentment, or self-sabotage. When integrated, however, the shadow becomes a source of strength. For the king archetype, the shadow is crucial. A king who denies his shadow becomes the tyrant, ruling through cruelty, paranoia, or control. History is full of such figures who, unable to confront their inner darkness, inflicted it upon the world. Conversely, a king who ignores his shadow entirely becomes the weakling, unable to make hard decisions, easily manipulated, and incapable of protecting his realm. Jung taught that the true king is one who has faced the monsters within himself and has brought them under his conscious rule. This is where Nietzsche's insight converges once again. He warned that those who fight monsters must be careful not to become monsters themselves. To live with power and purpose requires vigilance. A king must never lose sight of the fact that his greatest enemy lies within. By owning his shadow, he learns humility and gains the moral authority to rule. This process is not comfortable, but it is essential. For the individual seeking to embody the king archetype today, it means confronting insecurities, fears, and destructive impulses head-on. It means asking, where am I my own worst enemy? And refusing to hide from the answer. When this work is done, the king does not deny his darkness. He integrates it. He becomes whole. This wholeness is what gives him the ability to bless, to protect, and to rule wisely. The shadow does not disappear. It remains a part of him, but it no longer controls him from the shadows. Instead, it fuels his strength like a dragon tamed and harnessed. This is the responsibility of the king, to rule himself first, so that his presence becomes a source of stability and purpose for others. Part 4. The Crown of Purpose. If the king archetype represents authority, then its crown symbolizes purpose. Without purpose, even the most powerful figure is hollow. Nietzsche saw this emptiness clearly in his own time. He proclaimed that God is dead, not to celebrate the death of religion, but to lament the collapse of meaning in modern life. With the old foundations of morality crumbling, humanity faced the danger of drifting into nihilism, the belief that life has no value or meaning. For Nietzsche, the only cure for nihilism was the creation of new values. He challenged humanity to rise to the task of becoming creators, shaping life with their own vision of greatness. Carl Jung, though deeply spiritual, recognized the same crisis. He warned that modern man, cut off from the deeper symbols of the psyche, would lose touch with purpose and sink into despair or triviality. For Jung, individuation was not just about healing the psyche, but about discovering one's unique calling. Each person has an inner destiny, a personal myth, and to ignore it is to live a life of quiet desperation. To wear the crown of the king is to embrace this calling fully, to know why you exist and what you are here to accomplish. Purpose is not always a grand mission that changes the world. For some, it may be the quiet but profound act of raising a family with wisdom. For others, it may be the pursuit of art, philosophy, or leadership. The point is not the scale, but the authenticity. When the king archetype is active within us, our actions radiate meaning, no matter how ordinary they appear to others. Nietzsche sharpened this further with his idea of eternal recurrence. He asked us to imagine living our life over and over again, in the exact same way for eternity. If that thought fills us with dread, then perhaps we are not living with true purpose. But if we can embrace it with joy, if we can say yes to life exactly as it is, then we are living authentically. The crown of purpose is therefore not something bestowed from outside, but something forged within, through the courage to say yes to life in its fullness. The king with a crown of purpose does not stumble aimlessly or chase empty rewards. He lives with clarity, and this clarity inspires loyalty, creativity, and stability in those around him. Purpose is not only his crown, it is his light. Part 5. Power without tyranny. When most people hear the word power, they think of domination, control, or exploitation. But both Jung and Nietzsche challenge us to rethink this concept. For Jung, power is the natural result of inner wholeness. The integrated individual radiates authority, not because he forces it, but because it flows from his being. He does not need to shout to be heard. His presence itself is enough. Such power is generative, it gives life rather than draining it. Nietzsche's will to power, properly understood, is not about lording over others, but about overcoming oneself. The highest expression of power for Nietzsche is self-mastery. It is the ability to channel energy, passion, and creativity into the creation of something higher. The true king, then, is not a tyrant. He does not use his throne to crush others, but to elevate them. His power is life-affirming. This does not mean he is weak or naive. On the contrary, he is capable of decisive and even ruthless action when necessary. But unlike the tyrant, his decisions are not driven by insecurity or hunger for control. They are guided by responsibility and vision. He knows that the purpose of power is not self-indulgence, but stewardship. In practical terms, embodying power without tyranny today means refusing to manipulate or exploit others for personal gain. It means leading by example, setting standards of integrity, and creating environments where others can grow. In the workplace, it may mean empowering colleagues instead of micromanaging them. In relationships, it means supporting others rather than controlling them. And in one's personal life, it means setting boundaries without cruelty. Nietzsche reminded us that the weak envy the powerful, but the truly powerful are beyond envy. They create, they build, they inspire. Jung added that the person who integrates their unconscious no longer needs to seek power for its own sake, they already possess it within. To live as a king, then, is to carry power lightly, never forgetting that it is a gift meant to serve a higher purpose. Part 6. The King and the Community. A king does not exist in isolation. Even in Jung's psychology, the archetype of the king is not just a private symbol, it carries social weight. A true king stabilizes the realm, protects his people, and provides a vision for the future. Without this archetype, communities descend into disorder, fragmentation, and confusion. This is why in myths across cultures, when the king is sick or corrupted, the entire kingdom suffers. His state of being radiates outward into the world. For Jung, this symbol reflects the psychological truth that our inner life influences everything around us. A fragmented psyche creates fragmented relationships, while an integrated psyche generates harmony. The king within us becomes the center that holds the community together. In modern terms, this might mean a leader in a business, a parent in a family, or a teacher in a classroom. Wherever the king archetype is active, people feel safe, guided, and inspired. Nietzsche extends this idea with his vision of the creator of values. For him, the highest individuals are those who can give direction to society when old systems collapse. These individuals may not wear literal crowns, but they become kings of thought, culture, or innovation. They generate meaning in a world starving for it. The community thrives not because the king enforces obedience, but because his strength liberates others to rise into their own potential. In today's world of uncertainty, confusion, and constant noise, the need for the king archetype is greater than ever. Communities are hungry for figures who can embody integrity, courage, and vision. Each of us, by integrating the king within, can become such a figure, not necessarily on a global stage, but in the circles where we hold influence. By doing so, we heal not only ourselves, but the small kingdoms entrusted to us. Part 7. The integration of Jung and Nietzsche. At this point, we can see how the ideas of Jung and Nietzsche complement one another in the figure of the king. Jung gives us the structure, the archetypes, the shadow, and the process of individuation. Nietzsche gives us the fire, the will to power, the rejection of conformity, and the courage to create new values. Together, they create a model of kingship that is both psychologically profound and philosophically daring. The Jungian king is the ruler who has faced the shadow, integrated the unconscious, and achieved inner balance. He embodies stability, wisdom, and blessing. The Nietzschean king is the Overman, the one who creates meaning, embraces suffering, and rises above mediocrity. He embodies courage, creativity, and power. When combined, we get a vision of kingship that is both grounded and transcendent, stable yet dynamic. This integration also resolves a tension between the two. Nietzsche, though brilliant, sometimes left us with a vision that seemed too individualistic, almost isolated in its demand for greatness. Jung, however, emphasized wholeness and connection to the self, to others, and to the collective unconscious. By blending their insights, we learn that true kingship is neither selfish ambition nor selfless sacrifice. It is the harmony of both. It is living for one's highest calling while radiating that purpose into the lives of others. The king is therefore not an abstract idea or a distant myth. He is a living possibility within each of us. Every time we face our shadow, embrace our destiny, and lead with vision, we step closer to the throne. Every time we reject mediocrity and dare to create meaning where none existed before, we put on the crown. The integration of Jung and Nietzsche challenges us to become rulers of our own lives, not tyrants. Not weaklings, but kings who embody both depth and daring. Ending. The call to the throne. We have traveled through the psychology of Carl Jung and the philosophy of Friedrich Nietzsche to uncover the essence of the king. We have seen that the king is not a figure of domination, but of balance, purpose, and creation. He is the one who faces his shadow, who wears the crown of meaning, who wields power without tyranny, and who radiates stability into the community. He is the one who integrates Jung's wisdom with Nietzsche's fire, standing as both healer and creator, both guardian and visionary. The question now is not whether kings exist in the world, but whether you are willing to awaken the king within yourself. This journey is not easy. It requires courage, honesty, and a relentless will to overcome mediocrity. It requires you to face your own shadow, to discover your purpose, and to embrace life in its fullness, even its suffering. But if you accept this challenge, you will not only transform yourself, you will transform the world around you. The throne is not inherited, it is earned. And every step you take toward self-mastery, purpose, and courage is a step toward the crown. The psychology of the king is not just theory. It is a call to live with power and purpose. Carl Jung has shown us the path of individuation, and Nietzsche has given us the fire of the Overman. The rest is up to you, so I leave you with this. Do not wait for someone else to rule your life. Do not abdicate the throne to fear, chaos, or mediocrity. Rise, claim your destiny, and think with power and purpose. For within you lies the king, and the world is waiting for you to rule.